I'm super excited about this panel as well. As a person in long-term recovery myself, and the first person in recovery to be the assistant secretary at SAMHSA. I was the acting assistant secretary during the transition of the Biden-Harris administration. It's a real honor for me to be able to join you. Prior to coming back to SAMHSA in 2019, I worked for Governor Gina Raimondo, who's now Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, who started a recovery-friendly workplace initiative in Rhode Island when she was governor, and that continues to this day. She worked very closely with Governor Sununu on a bipartisan basis, and I'm excited to see my old friend John Burns here today, who's going to talk about some of the work that's happening up in New Hampshire about this. But just to bring it back to National Drug Control Strategy, because I think a lot of the panels have been doing that, and the National Drug Control Strategy is really what's driving the agenda here over the last 2 days. Objective number one under recovery efforts in the National Drug Control Strategy is to see the number of states operating recovery-ready workplace initiatives to increase that by 75% by 2025, which is a super laudable goal. We know people who have access to recovery-friendly workplaces are much more poised to have success in that workplace. SAMHSA has a definition of recovery and 4 major dimensions of a life in recovery: health, home, purpose, and community. If somebody, we know one of the biggest barriers to somebody succeeding in recovery is the fact that they have a job. And not just that they have a job, but a job that they can love, be successful in, and find meaning and purpose from. And recovery-friendly workplace initiatives or recovery-ready workplace initiatives help people achieve that goal, help them stay in recovery for the long term. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, and I've had the opportunity to visit many recovery-friendly workplaces in my, in the last few years since this has become a thing, so to speak. And what strikes me about them is that there's a real opportunity with them because you get to educate the leadership in the company, you get to educate the other employees in the company about what recovery is. How many people in that company may have had a negative perception of addiction prior to? How many people in that company had a loved one who was struggling, didn't know where to turn for help? And when you infuse recovery-friendly policies across an organization, really it helps and benefits everybody, not just people in recovery, but the entire corporation, the entire community ultimately that interacts with that company. So super excited to be here. We have great guests for this panel, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. And we're going to start with Ben Garthwaite, who, as Andrea mentioned, is the CEO of Force Mars Group and has been doing some incredible work in this space. So without further ado, Ben, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's really an honor to be here with everyone. I think I come to this panel as a business leader first, trying to do the best we can for our people in our company. And I'll just give you 2 seconds of background of how we kind of got to where we are, maybe as a bit of a frame for the discussion that's going to come. So as a company, we've been involved in different aspects of SUD work, mostly through communications research over the years within the military and some work on binge drinking, and then helping found the National Opioid Action Coalition. But we're a research first firm, so we follow the data, right? And the research showed us that the number of people living in recovery from SUD and the relative shortage of resources towards the research, the services, the infrastructure for recovery, it was undeniable, right? So that's where we've decided to make our investments to bolster, center, sponsor, amplify, a lot of the work that those that are at the summit have already spoken, that have been hard at work on this topic for many years, doing what we can to support that. And at the same time, we can't help but ask ourselves, can we do more within our own firm, right? and this I think is an important question for all business leaders to be asking. We have so much influence over the policies, the benefits, the culture of the workplace, where people spend so much of their time. So, I mean, I think to echo, Grant Baldwin mentioned, we're ready for a recovery better nation. I think we're certainly ready for a recovery ready workplace.
Thank you so much, Ben. That's really exciting. And to have somebody who's such a champion like yourself leading that effort there, we really appreciate it. Next, let's hear from Todd Dunn, who's president of the UAW Local 862 in Louisville. Todd, I understand you guys just hosted the Mobilized Recovery Bus in town. So introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, it's been really busy. My name's Todd Dunn. I'm president of UAW Local 862. I started out, I guess, my career and life path as a Desert Storm participant. I graduated from high school and I had a nomination to go to the Air Force Academy, but unfortunately my eyes wouldn't allow it. So I wanted to fly, and then I decided I want to go into the Army. I went to Desert Storm in 90-91/Shield, worked there, a lot of different opportunities. So basically I just transitioned, going through that ladder, right, that climb. And then I got to get hired on at Ford Motor Company. 2 or 3 years into it as a veteran, I wanted to be a servant leader. Again, leave it better than I found it, and started working and ran for office through my union. And I became a representative taking care of those people in my area. And one of the things that happened is I lost someone, and I was right back to where I was, where I had lost lives in the military, and it kind of affected me. Around the same time, I was a working committee person, which was like an alternate. I just started my career as that. So when I wasn't filling in for the union I worked, I injured my knee on the chain gang up in Paint, and I ended up getting myself into a predicament to where I thought I was my own doctor about the same time, and kind of continuing the self-medication, and I shouldn't have. And I really got to a point in my career where I lost someone, and that put me right back in that same, I guess, PTSD, if you will. Over the years, I've learned PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress growth. But time there when I wanted to take my life because of some of the things that I was dealing with, being addicted to opioids and alcohol. And, you fast forward through your career, and I've been president for 12 years. I was vice president for 6 years. I'm also the president of the Greater Louisville Central Labor Council in Louisville, Kentucky, where we represent 54,000 union members. And I'm vice president of the UAW Ford Sub 2, which is over the 7 North American assembly plants. But I've really worked hard to focus my energy over the last 6-7 years in recovery. I'm also the ambassador for Active Heroes, where I can tell my story. And, we have a lot of veterans in the plant, so it's kind of a little more complex, but the connectivity is all the same. And just wanting to work towards recovery policies, for Ford and UAW. To be proactive in ways that we've never approached, the issue before. What happens is I don't want to mean mug or be mean or say something negative about companies or my company, but, things tend to fall into a category, squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So those people in the workforce that are injured, they get sent out to get treated. That treatment sometimes leads into opioid issues. And then we get sent out again for treatment, and then we come back to work. So it's kind of looked at as data. And we need to look at it from a personal side, a personal experience, and continue that assistance after they come back from treatment, because recovery is a continuing life process. So we talked about that this week in the convention here in Paducah. We brought in the Mobilized Recovery tour bus. Ryan Hampton, what an awesome individual. Nancy Hale with Operation Unite. Tara Mosley with People Advocating for Recovery. Mark LaPalme, who's a great friend of mine. I don't know if you can see him wearing my hat, but I've got the Isaiah House hat on. And we've been really moving the needle significantly. And here's a guy who's founder and CEO.
We're going to give you some time, Todd, to talk about all that.
Yep.
But let's do let's get John in for a second here, just to introduce himself. but thank you for your service to our country, to the labor movement, and to the recovery community.
Cool.
What an amazing story. John, why don't you jump in and introduce yourself? You're here representing the organized recovery community today, and you've had an amazing journey of your own up in New Hampshire. Let's bring you in for a little part of the conversation.
Thanks, Tom. It's an honor to be here and appreciate the invite. My name's John Burns. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm also a family member. I have a daughter who's in recovery. So I've kind of lived this from two different aspects, but I'm the director for SOS Recovery Community Organization. We're a recovery community organization on the seacoast of New Hampshire. We operate 4 recovery community centers. We are also a grantee under Governor Sununu here in New Hampshire's Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative. So he has a central hub with recovery friendly advisors, and we were funded initially as a grantee to provide local supports to support those recovery friendly advisors and work with businesses. So we helped connect roughly 150 plus businesses to that effort here in New Hampshire. There's over 300 right now in New Hampshire. And we've been funded a second time in the last year around that work, and we're doing some different stuff. So it's ranged from workforce development, it's ranged from connecting employers, it's involved, actually working with employers and providing peer-based recovery supports in the workspace with private employers and businesses and manufacturers. And additionally, as an organization, we run some statewide criminal justice programs. We run some parenting and family-based programs, and we also serve as a syringe service provider here in New Hampshire as well, doing harm reduction supports and supplies and services too. So doing a lot of different pieces that I think all help inform us in how we present that work in a peer-based way with employers and working to connect the community around that. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Ben, for joining us. We have some questions to kind of guide our conversation. I'd love to be able to get through as many of them as possible. So if we can keep these kind of rapid fire answers, and then we have about 15 minutes to do that, and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A from the audience too. So let's start out with how labor and business are creating a safe place for people to identify that they have problems in the workplace, and what are you doing to support them in their recovery? From the side of the CEO, Ben, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, we're a 400-person organization, so we're not tiny, but we're definitely not Amazon big. But frankly, I think our approach here scales. For us, this topic, I think you mentioned the word safety. I look at this at 2 levels, right? There's the foundation. What are we doing to build a culture and instilling values where anything you can proactively seek support on any topic? You're having challenges with work, accessibility, reporting harassment, anything. And then secondly, how do we get really specific about topics as complicated as recovery and SUD? So we're working on the foundation day in and day out, and then rolling out specific program around SUD and recovery. And that we could talk all day about that, but you're talking about the facts, what benefits are out there, what resources available. You're trying to make, talk to the various different journeys that folks might have, education, training, confidentiality, etc.
John or Todd, you want to jump in on either on the labor side or the community side to talk about why it's important for people to have that safe place to identify?
Well, with Ford Motor Company, it's a little bit more complex in Louisville, Kentucky. Just so you have a scale, we're 14,500 plus workers, right? So we got 2 assembly plants that are 22 miles apart from each other. One's 9,000, one's about 3,900, and then we have 7 other units. So we have different units. It's Ford, it's multiple companies that work together under one roof. So one of the challenges for us is to try and have that private employer and our union coming together with one overall initiative, because we have different policies from these different companies, and trying to get them aligned is challenging. So what we're trying to do is put together resolutions and back that up with collective bargaining changes with the company in a joint program effort to say, look, here's our overarching goal. Here's how we want to address this. Even though these companies may have different ways to go about it, we have to have some type of alignment. And what's really been great about it with this conference here is we had the governor here, and we had some very important players. And I think it highlighted the reasoning of why we need to do that, because we're losing people. You can say you're doing this and you're doing something great, but it's not. If it's not effective, then it's just a plan.
Is that what's driving Ford to come to the table? Is it the fact that people are dying?
I think it's the fact that us as a workforce and as a union leadership, we're telling the companies, look, these people are getting hurt on the job. They deserve to get treatment to heal themselves. And then when these other horrible, non-benefits of these injuries, and then we got addiction in the workplace, it's not warranty. This is not warranty. This is not acceptable. Not 10%, not 20%, no value is acceptable. And we're telling the company we got to do not only more for our own in-house, but we've got to join up with every other vendor company that falls in our wheelhouse at those assembly plants, and we got to find alignment. So we're as a union, we're passing resolutions. We put a resolution together with AFL-CIO, Mobilize Recovery, and our Constitution, and that covers gaming, ag, auto, aerospace, agricultural. So it's just not auto manufacturing. So we're raising the bar and trying to not worry about keeping the UAW wheel shiny, but make it effective.
Amazing.
So we got to shoot, move, and communicate a whole lot better.
Amazing work. Amazing. John, jump in.
So I think when I look at like the safety piece, it's really from a community's perspective. I think it's building the culture and educating around stigma and creating workplaces where people like I can't tell you how many employers I've come in contact with that are offering a recovery friendly workplace, but their employees don't know about it. And so what are you doing if you don't communicate that and you don't create that culture? Then so I look at it from that. And I also think that like looking at it beyond the individual and looking at it from a family perspective too. So we have a lot of individuals that need that culture, but we also have a lot of parents, we have a lot of spouses, we have a lot of family members who have loved ones struggling to find or maintain their recovery. And because of that stigma, they often are hiding it from their employers rather than being supported. And it's a missed opportunity, especially when you start to look beyond the human piece too, of just that compassion, but productivity. I remember being a father and being in a private sector before I got into this, and having an employer who was compassionate, but I didn't know it. So I hid it because I was fearful of losing my job. And I've also run family support groups where I've had moms and spouses call me and they're whispering and they're on break and they're outside, and like, what kind of productivity are you getting out of that person? And what kind of trauma are they enduring as they try and help their loved ones? So just building that whole culture, I think, is really important to the safety piece.
Yeah, that was something that occurred to me when I visited one of the plants up in New Hampshire, who was a recovery-friendly workplace, and they talked about that mother who's coming to work every day and worried about her son who's at home, lost his job, whether or not she's going to come home to find him overdosed or not, and the kind of stress that caused that employee throughout the day. So they got that son the help that he needed, and brought the mother back to the workplace on a full-time basis, not only her body but her mind. And I think that was a really powerful story. One of the things I think that's important too is that businesses, whether you're UAW and Ford or Ben's small little 400-person organization, you guys have purchasing power, and we know that health insurance oftentimes is a barrier for people who are trying to get help. How are you guys holding payers accountable for providing access to care for people in the workforce or their family members who need it? Somebody want to take that first?
So it's a little easier for me, I guess, talking to the UAW side of things, with us having joint programs, we have collective bargaining agreements. Unfortunately, our healthcare is somewhat negotiated every year. However, our overarching coverage doesn't change. So once we negotiate the benefits, we have that benefit. And in our contract, we get 65% of our pay. And as long as they're JCO certified, in this case with recovery, they can get coverage the very first day. We also couple that in our Greater Louisville Central Labor Council to where we've created a labor crisis fund. And we also try to help offset some of those other emergencies that come up. So it's not enablement. It's just saying, hey, look, if you get into a crisis, we got you and we'll help you out. But as far as the healthcare coverage, we have excellent healthcare coverage. We're a maximum out of pocket for family for $1,000. They'll cover 18 days stay on an average. And then after that, it's IOP. What our goal is now is places like Isaiah House to have a 28-day program, and their results are so much stronger, and the recovery rates are so much higher, more sticking. So what we've got to do this negotiations is go to the company and say, look, we don't want to take this. We want to join the company with our efforts to bring this to our membership, even at a cost, because it's the right thing to do. And employers today are asking to open up agreements and raising benefits just to keep their employees, because employees are leaving those companies. So it's very important for us to put our arms around this and do the right thing.
Great points, Todd. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to hear Todd and John's perspective on this. As a private company, we can kind of choose our own destiny here and make the decision on what we want to cover, what we don't. We're making the payments ourselves, so we definitely hold ourselves accountable to it. But I know this is a much more important issue for other organizations.
Right. A lot of times the workplace can create stresses that might lead a person back to using, and companies also have a responsibility to make sure that not just create a recovery-friendly workplace, but a workplace that's good for all their employees, so that doesn't happen. Are you guys seeing any things happening in the environment out there to eliminate whether it's workplace stress or injuries associated with their jobs, so that doesn't lead people back out to using?
In our case with UAW Ford, we really have a excellent program, ergonomic program, and that ergonomic program is to focus on those jobs that are causing injuries and change those jobs. And we've done a great job over the years in doing that. One of the things that we've talked about having a recovery-friendly workplace, which also there's a big part of that, and that's that culture change that the guy's been talking about. And there's so many of our members that turn their head, and being our brothers, sisters, and our sisters and brothers keepers, we have to have a program that advocates for us to go talk to them. Unfortunately, there's been more historical presence of employees being terminated. Well, they got terminated because something happened in the workplace. They lashed out at someone. They thought they were type of substance. They test them and they terminate them and then say, okay, go get fixed. Well, if you're trying to do that, you just increased the probability of a failure rate, right? To go and get help, come back out. You're still trying to get your job. You're an IOP. Well, you're depressed again. You start using. So that's one thing that's been huge with our building chairpersons at these two assembly plants, and they've got that changed. And Ford Motor Company has seen the positiveness out of that. So that's really helping. But I really think we need to focus too on advocating for our other employees, not to think that they're going to drop someone in, but to now knowing we have a more positive program where employees doesn't have to worry about being terminated, and they're not afraid to make that walk of shame, because there's a lot of employees that just don't do that because they don't want anyone to know.
Yep, totally. John, let me direct this question to you. How's the recovery community assisting businesses in developing workplace supports?
Through our efforts, we've come up with some creative things that we've found to be really effective. So one is just providing peer recovery coaching to employers that are engaged in this, because I think too often we see employers look at this recovery friendly initiative as we got to get people to treatment, and then, well, let's get them to treatment. Now they should be cured. And we all know that the reality, that's not the reality, and that there's a return to work, and we want to prevent a return to use, and we want to provide the supports they need. So providing a peer with lived experience to kind of do that work around wellness planning with them can be a huge boost. And we've had a lot of employers who have come to us who said, we want to hire people in recovery, but we're terrified. And so also, you know, we've kind of created that TA for human resources and employers to call us and say, like, we need some support here. We're not sure what to do in this scenario. And we don't provide the legal advice, but we can provide some insights as to what might be the best approach. As well as and then we've taken it to 24/7 dispatches for some manufacturers, where we have a hotline that they can dispatch one of our staff members for recovery supports. And we've also taken it with employers. We have an employer who loves hiring people in recovery right now, and he loves giving them access to going to a mutual support meeting. What he found was the meetings last an hour and his lunch break's an hour. And he was like, so it takes 15 minutes for them to get there and 15 minutes to get back to work. I'm losing an hour and a half instead of an hour, but I want to support this. So we were able to collaborate with them, and we bring the meetings to the employer now, and we do it in their break room, which creates a really good culture for that too. So those are just a few of the things that we've done that I think have been pretty effective and impactful for employers, and kind of creating those collaborations with employers to do that.
Those are great examples, John. Thanks for sharing those. You know, I want folks to know that this is really a growing movement. We talked about the Mobilized Recovery Bus Tour. I was met the bus out in Sacramento at our National Rally for Recovery, hosted by CCAP and Faces and Voices of Recovery, and then traveled on the bus down to San Francisco to the Google headquarters and to the Facebook headquarters, and got to meet Googlers in recovery. You know, a company like Google doing this. Amazon has been mentioned. You know, there's a gentleman out on the West Coast who works for Amazon headquarters, who's created an employee workplace group there, who are doing some amazing things. I know there's some women at Lockheed Martin who have done some amazing work around recovery-friendly workplaces. So this is really happening in small companies and large companies all over the country. So maybe turning to you, Ben, you know, maybe you could talk a little bit about, you know, and I know you've participated in some of the other panels today, and you may have heard some of the barriers that have been addressed come up. What should leadership in companies do to eliminate some of these barriers that the prior panels have discussed?
Yeah, and I think there's, you know, one of the barriers that John just brought up a second ago bears out as well. And yeah, so we just came out of the field of a national survey of employees in the workplace around SUD, what resources are available, what are their attitudes, knowledge, et cetera. And, you know, one thing that stood out, just leapt off the page, is folks don't know what benefits are available. They're woefully unaware of even just the basics of what benefits are there for them. And I think that gets to John's point earlier. And then the second point that was really a bit surprising and hard to deny is when asked when asked about their attitudes towards employees who they found out were in recovery, close to 80% had a more positive or unchanged view. And that's very similar to what we found when we asked about learning they were mental health or getting support for other health topics. So I think one of the big takeaways there is communicate. And it's not just an HR thing. So, you know, our study found that most people would rather go to their managers, right? Especially if that manager is demonstrating themselves as understanding and caring. And if they explicitly said, come to me. So there's some very tangible things I think that we can do to address these. And I think the beautiful thing about it is these are in the organization's control, right? I think one of our researchers, Claire, who actually is moderating here, put this beautifully, and she said, the workforce is ready. So we need to get the workplace ready to support the workforce. So
Got to get it caught up, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, please,
Something
go ahead, Tim.
really baseline, so simple. We've been working for about 4 years to create a app, and not just an average app, but one-way communication with control, but also a support a channel to where an employee on the line can ask for support, and they can do it privately, where it will go to their committee person or ESSP rep. But we have several spokes, and what happens is, as a president, just like this week, I got on there and did a video, had the governor with me, had a sidebar conversation, Jamie Link, the Labor Cabinet Secretary, and talked about what we were doing. And also myself as a president saying, hey, I'm in recovery and have been in recovery, and this is important for us to take care of our membership. So that communication is super key, but also in our ability, we have a ESSP, EAP representative spoke, which goes in and basically breaks down and says, these are your benefits. So we do pushes from the president, everybody gets. They have to go on and select the ESSP EAP representative, but we actually tried to navigate them so many different times during the year, but we communicate, and that's really changed the game. That's been a game changer for us. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of those thoughts. I know at SAMHSA, we have worked hard to create a recovery-friendly workplace, and of course, we're the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. So you would think that we would be far ahead of the game with regard to this, but we put a call out for staff last month, knowing that September was Recovery Month. We were going to have our all hands meeting on September 1st, and we wanted to have some employees in recovery share their personal stories. And we heard back from several employees who wanted to do it, but we did hear from a couple who were afraid to come out and to share their story, whether it was fear of retaliation or disclosure in some way. So that even at the place that's helping the rest of the country and advancing the behavioral health of the nation, if we're having problems, or I don't say we're having problems, but if we have employees who think that maybe it's not okay, that's got to be pervasive other places in the community.